Through all the lies and deceptions, there is one common denominator that remains the source of all things. And this is where it gets really exciting. Sound and resonance, the common links of creation. Modern science tells us that we live in an electromagnetic universe. Everything spins and vibrates. I'd like to correct that. I'd like to say that it's not an electromagnetic universe, it's a magneto-electric universe. There's a very big difference between the two. And again, it's a small little subtlety, but it's a very important subtlety, because magnetism is a thing that rules the universe, not electricity. Sound, magneticism, electricity. And you'll see how this chain reaction causes everything that we observe when we look up at the night sky or the nature around us. Everything in creation spins and vibrates. Everything has its own prime resonance frequency. Everything. And this is why once we can identify a prime resonance frequency of a bacterium or an atom or whatever it is, or a soccer field, we can then manipulate that object with its prime resonance frequency. Sound and resonance, common links of creation and religion. In Christianity, it's the word. In Hinduism, it's Om. The Egyptians believed the universe was sung into creation, and the original people of Australia, not the aboriginal, I forgot to take the ab out. They're not abnormal. The original people of Australia. It's a twist on words there, remember? Keep that in mind. So it's the original people of Australia believed that the world was created with 3 sacred songs. And then we have the phenomenal similarities between the 6 days of creation in Christianity and the word that created everything, the 6 aspects of Om, and the 6 aspects of the all-seeing eye of Horus, and you start seeing the connections between all these ancient cultures and the creation stories. And then the creation stories get even more interesting when you read the Hindu creation story. It says, everything was so peaceful and silent that Vishnu slept undisturbed by dreams or motion. From the depths, a humming sound began to tremble. Sound is the source of all creation. Sound and resonance is responsible for everything. It is the breath of the Creator, the prime resonance frequency, and the source code for everything in creation, including our DNA. How cymatics and sound helps to form and shape our DNA and the structure of our DNA based on the cymatics. And that word cymatics, it comes from Hans Jenny in the 50s and 60s, the brilliant work that he did and showed us how sound and resonance is responsible for everything in creation. Okay, so the original people of Australia have a creation story that says time began when the supernatural beings awoke and broke through the surface of the earth. And the supernatural beings broke through the surface of the earth, and they created the surface of the earth with 3 sacred songs. This is from Hans Jenny's brilliant video, Cymatics. This is powder on a metal plate. It's not a liquid or a jelly, it's powder. You can see landscapes being formed here over extended periods of time. Mountains can form, valleys, volcanoes, all to do with the sound of the earth, coming out of the earth. Now watch that. It's very similar to this picture that I took from an aeroplane flying over Western Australia. And you can start seeing how that kind of landscape would have been formed from the cymatics of the sound of the earth itself. Ancient civilizations understood sound and frequency, and they used it for everything. They used it as a tool, and they also used it to control and manipulate humanity. This is nothing new. We know by now that the pineal gland is pretty much what represents the all-seeing eye of Horus. It's a receiver, it's a transmitter, it's a powerful tool that we should be using, but we're not, because it was manipulated with and probably compromised. And it seems that these ancient beings, these either bird-headed beings or winged beings, used these cone-shaped tools and other techniques to manipulate our pineal gland and manipulate our DNA. They controlled us, the tree of life or the DNA, and they probably used sound and frequency to do that with. But what's important is to look at, so we got a pine cone, a cone-shaped tool in his hand, and that weird wristwatch that has got these 12 cone shapes pointing at the center. And then also this here. This here looks just like the stone tools that I've been picking up, a cone-shaped tool on his arm. Seems like everything is encoded here when they draw these or carve these things. It's not just accidental. Everything has got a reason why it's there. So you'll realize why that is so important, because this wristwatch with those 12 cones pointing at the middle shows us that they weren't only controlling our thoughts and our minds with sound and frequency and magnetics in ancient times, but we've been doing it for ages now. There's your all-seeing eye of Horus. There's your half of that weird wristwatch with the 6 cones facing the middle, all controlling us with sound and frequency. And this brings us to using sound as a tool in technology. Sound creates light. It's very obvious. We know that God said, let there be light, and you can do this yourself by attaching a speaker to an LED light and see what happens. The Ankh was used as a healing tool. We know that from images like this, and there's a lot more to be said about this. The medicine wheel is a cross in a circle that represents sound, that primordial source of sound. It shows that the Native American healers knew that sound could cure and could heal. This is a Sumerian seal that represents sound, and also this is where the swastika has its origin, in sound and resonance. The Ark of the Covenant was obviously a very powerful sound energy generating device. It was also a communication device that Moses could communicate with God and with his people when he sat on the mercy seat below the angels and their wings, and was also a very powerful device that brought down the walls of Jericho, because obviously gave off some sort of a low frequency vibration, and then with a blast from a trumpet and a shout, the walls came tumbling down. So either an electromagnetic pulse or something of that kind that brought the walls of Jericho down. Royal Raymond Rife, you should know by now, that cured the man that found the cure for all disease with sound and resonance. They were converted to electric impulses. And right here in Sedona, in a library in Sedona, is his handwritten manuscript that you can read all his handwritten frequencies that he wrote down for cures for all the disease. All the different cancers. This is for diphtheria. This is for tuberculosis. And so it goes. Lakovsky, the multiple wave oscillator, that has got an incredible record of curing all kinds of diseases, including cancers. And more recently, Anthony Holland, who in a TED talk in 2011 shows how he cures cancer with sound frequencies. Unfortunately, Anthony Holland thought he'd become famous. And since then, we've not heard anything of him. He sort of disappeared. He didn't realize that the sound healing of cancer was discovered long before him, because he mentions it as a new phenomenon. Sound continues to amaze us. Sound can levitate. By now, you would have seen this many times. Just a very quick idea that sound actually does levitate things. But this is not how the ancients used to levitate the very big, heavy objects. This is a very different technique used here. This is just pressure waves that can levitate things, very light objects, but it does give you the ability to imagine that sound actually levitates. John Keeley levitated stuff and drilled sound holes with sound in 1888 already. Peter Davey boiled water with sound since 1940, and he died several years ago. Sound creates what's known as a star in a jar, called sonoluminescence. When you take a sphere of water and you expose it to certain frequencies, it gives off a very, very bright light at the center of the water, called a star in a jar, which is just absolutely not quite what it is. Magnetrons are really just very, very. It's called a resonant cavity magnetron. That is created through resonance, sound resonance. It creates huge amounts of energy that's used in laser beams, used in microwaves, laser beams, etc. Sound acts as a cloak of invisibility. Sound can make things disappear. This 3D sort of plastic pyramid that they created, when they expose it to certain sound frequencies, anything they put underneath it disappears, becomes invisible. And then makes you wonder if that was the original idea for the structures of some monasteries. What do monks do in monasteries? They sit and chant. And I've heard from many people that do a lot of chanting and monastery kind of work, whatever that may mean, that at times when they're in a group and they're chanting, they look up and some people are gone, they're not there. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but I've heard that from many people. They claim that people simply disappear when they get into a deep state of meditation and toning. And sound creates hurricanes. There are two guys in 2003 that lodged a patent to create hurricanes out of sound, believe it or not. And I believe they were granted their patent to create hurricanes. And maybe this is how they create the weather for us, without us even realizing it. And creates superclusters, galaxies, supercluster galaxies. This is from NASA, from 2003. They say that they found a supercluster that was resonating 57 octaves lower than middle C, and it is in a key of B flat. I find it interesting, because B flat is just a semitone up from A, and if A is the first frequency or the source code of creation, and B flat is just a semitone up from that. This is just how my mind works, right? So it's very interesting. So is that like the first basic level of creation, up one level from the creative source code itself that becomes visible to us? Who knows? This is what it looks like. These are images that they show us of this galaxy, and it looks just like the cymatic patterns from Hans Jenny's the lycopodium powder creating shapes and mountains. There you go. Doesn't it look just like that? And just realize that this is how things are created. These are the sound waves that they show us of this galaxy. And if you look at it very carefully, it's a very specific toroidal shape, toroidal pattern. Sound creates volcanoes. Imagine, the Earth is ringing like a bell all the time. So these frequencies keep coming out of the Earth all the time. What do you think creates the volcanoes? What creates the heat underground that creates the volcanoes?
More like a bubbling.
Heat is just an expression of frequency, right? Actually, that we perceive as heat. Luc Montagnier, 2011, spontaneously generated DNA in water with sound frequencies. If you go on YouTube, you can watch one of these latest documentaries where he creates a virus with a sound frequency from Paris to Rome by sending a sound frequency of a virus across a telephone line, and they reconstitute the virus that he has in a lab in Paris. They reconstitute the same virus in a lab in Rome. This is just spectacular stuff, right? So now you can see how we can manifest things. We become creators and can manifest anything with sound. And this is why we now know that sound is the ultimate source of free energy. And Nikola Tesla knew this. He knew that the earth rings like a bell, and he used the sound of the earth because it constantly rings, it never stops. He used it as a source of energy to create his free energy device. And this is where we realize that sound and magnetism is inextricably connected. It's sound that creates magnetic fields. And moving magnetic fields create electricity. It's in that order that creation seems to happen. So we don't live in an electromagnetic universe, we live in a magneto-electric universe.